Ambassador Beate Grzeski, welcome to Europe Now.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and talk to you.
Well, we're delighted that you can join us today. Ambassador, Australia and Germany have never been closer, so says the Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese. Lots of evidence to support that particular claim in terms of the trade between our two nations, in excess of some $20 billion. Certainly in terms of cooperation on institutional, legal and industry and enterprise, so many things happening. How has this come about, and how would you characterise the strategic alliance between Australia and Germany?
Yes, Australia and Germany have deep roots. Many Germans also emigrated to Australia. We are still seeing quite a number of German ancestry here in Australia. But we are also glad that we are looking firmly into the future. We have an enhanced strategic partnership that is being just renewed some in the last month. So it's very broad. It covers scientific cooperation, cultural cooperation, and also, of course, political cooperation. Visits on a high level have been taking place to Germany and also to Australia. I think this is also important that at the very top of the governments, there is also a personal link and a good interaction. So that also happened when Prime Minister visited Berlin.
Australia's entry, along with various other G7 countries, into the climate club that Germany has done so much to facilitate and foster, now creates all sorts of interesting opportunities, particularly around green hydrogen, critical minerals. What do you see potentially in terms of interactions between German and Australian business and industry and enterprise?
I would say that now, given the geopolitical situation with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, it's very clear that it's important to diversify the trade links, and that in that case also Australia has a lot to offer. You mentioned critical minerals. That is something where Germany is very keen to engage more with Australia, and we have also the institutional framework in place. We have an energy working group, and in that field, various interactions take place, and we can look into the future of our cooperation. You mentioned hydrogen. That is also something where we think that Germany and Australia can work more together in future.
Climate change remains top of the political agenda, and the European Union is committed to being carbon neutral by 2050 with lots of targets along the way. Can you tell us how are things unfolding in Germany? What actions is Germany undertaking in terms of getting towards this carbon neutrality?
Germany has, like all the other countries, also to do its homework, has to reduce carbon emissions, has to realize the goal of net zero. We have engaged to reach that by 2040. And for instance, there is in our national energy grid, we have to change from fossil fuel and from gas. The heating has to be reformed. There is a certain law on that, which shows that all these questions not only have a technological component but also a social component. People are used to their method of heating and have certain concerns if in future they will be able to also to afford the new energy. What does it mean for myself? And so in that respect, it's also a task for a government to make sure that there is a just transition. The just transition to carbon neutrality, not only in Germany, but also trying to foster that in other countries. So that is why we are also engaged in about 28 energy partnerships with countries worldwide. Ones that can produce energy that we can import, and where we also can support their energy transition.
I'm very interested to hear you underscore the importance of the social dimension around these targets. I'm a sociologist by training, and I think your emphasis is absolutely spot on, because so often these targets can appear, they're numbers on pages and they're particular objectives and they're part of a policy dialogue, but connecting them to people's lives and their lives in these times is really critical. So I think that sounds a very important emphasis indeed. Ambassador, in your own career, you have identified both climate and energy security as fundamental challenges. And I'm thinking, in terms of your own work from Beijing to Moscow, now to Canberra, could you just tell us a little bit more about what you see as the current dynamic of those challenges for the world?
That is something you rightly mentioned as a key problem. We are facing a key challenge. We have seen now we are in a quite tense geopolitical situation. We have several crises, sometimes even war, in the German and the European neighborhood, and it shows that that energy supply has a geopolitical dimension. We see now with the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine that energy can be used as a weapon. And so how can we, as diplomats, how can the German government in its foreign policy react to those developments? How can we diversify our supply? How can we de-risk our relationships? And that is something that Germany is very active in, together with its partners as regards the energy supplies of Russia. We have reduced them nearly to zero. And also in our relationship with China. We have started with a strategy, a China strategy, where China is regarded as a partner, as a competitor, and a systemic rival. In the last period, we also have to concentrate a bit more on the last 2 points.
In terms of other challenges, arguably no challenge in recent years has been as significant for Europe as the migration crisis. Certainly since 2015, there's been this veritable explosion in enforced migration and asylum seekers and so on and so forth. German Chancellor Mr. Scholz has along with senior colleagues in the government in Germany, has talked about a national pact. There have been much debate and discussion around all of that. And then obviously you've got the European Union and its contribution to trying to rethink migration and enforced migration in this current age of extensive and intensive globalization. Can you tell us more about that dialogue in Germany, and also how, given Germany's fundamental position within the European Union and its support for the European Union as a key contributor, how you see that challenge at the current juncture?
Well, migration is really a very important topic, and I always thought about it. I remember a statement by the then IOM Director General, William Swing. He said, migration is not a problem to be solved, but a challenge to be managed. It means it's a long-term agenda that we have to follow. And in that respect, it clearly shows that no country can do it on its own. You have to work together. And Therefore, it's in the European neighborhood. You mentioned 2015. We had a lot of refugee flows coming in after Syria, after the civil war in Syria. And the European Union has been instrumental in reaching an agreement with Turkey that Turkey would be supported to host refugees in Turkey and also support, let's say, that illegal entry into the European Union would then be controlled. So migration has different aspects. You cannot solve it as a country alone. You cannot solve it by just concentrating on preventing or fighting illegal migration. But you also have to look at the other side. You have to facilitate regular migration in a managed way and also see the development component. That means in concrete terms that the Chancellor, now Chancellor Scholz, travels extensively also to Africa, to other regions of origin, to also reach out to the governments there and see how this challenge can be managed together. And in that respect, it's also very important that we have European Union cooperation. So the commissioners from the European Union are working together with member states, going on missions to those countries to find a dignified solution for the migrants, but also a working management of our borders and also of the influx. And you see that migration is a very controversial subject in the population, a lot of concerns. And key is probably that that population, citizens have the impression that there is a kind of control or management of the situation.
I'd like to stick with challenges, global challenges, just for a moment longer. I mean, certainly in terms of current geopolitical instabilities, ranging all the way from the Russian-Ukraine war through to what's unfolding between Israel and Palestine, but so many other, geopolitical tensions and hotspots. And then alongside that, across Europe and in many other countries around the world, you've got this sort of resurgence of right-wing popularism. I'm interested in, I'm interested in your thoughts about the following. Some critics have argued that, the EU as emblematic of its underwriting of a rules-based international order, that we're at a critical juncture because we're at this sort of, some critics argue we're at a kind of tipping point where we see this movement away from these aspirations for global cosmopolitanism, for kind of multilateral political decision-making, towards a kind of unilateralism, to the resurgence of making countries great again and having this very strong focus on a kind of renewed nationalism. From your vantage point, how significant is that political challenge, and how do you see Germany's role within the European Union to combat that and to be very vocal about speaking up for the rules-based international order?
You're absolutely right. These discussions are very very intensive now in most of the countries, also in Germany. Germany is a country that is surrounded by 9 neighboring states, countries, which is different from Australia, your continent. But that means we know very well that we can only work together with our neighbors. And therefore we are also a founding member of the European Union after the devastating world wars in Germany had begun in the last century. So the interaction with other countries is in our DNA also. we are not only in a situation of geopolitical challenges, but also technological challenges. A lot is changing for everyone. We have the question of artificial intelligence comes up. What does this mean for our workforce? What does it mean for the concrete future? So there's a lot of concerns coming up. And in that situation, you probably tend to look back at the things you know and the things that give you a bit more certainty. So the work of a government of Germany and also in the European Union is to really deliver also on the aspirations, hopes, concerns of the citizens. And in that respect, I think the most important is that on these big challenges, the transnational challenges, the governments are delivering, and from a firm basis of values that are enshrined in our basic law and in the European Treaty, which is democracy, human rights, freedom, all that. That's what Europe stands for, that's what Germany stands for. And therefore, at the very core of this government's interests, of the ministers and also the former one, is the upholding of the international rules-based order.
Prior to becoming German ambassador to Australia, you were special envoy to the island Pacific states. Can you tell me about that work that you undertook?
Yeah, it was, or it has been a very interesting task. I was a roving ambassador for 13 Pacific island states. I did this for 1 year to reinvigorate our ties that Germany has with the region after COVID. There was this disruption. To listen and to understand a bit more, because the region is obviously nearly 18,000 kilometers away, and also to look for ideas what we can do to cooperate stronger. And what I found out is, not surprisingly, climate change for them at the Pacific Island Forum, the PIF countries, is the most intense security challenge. So there is something where we can deliver also and can give also solutions, or at least some experiences from our side to those countries.
Can I ask you about your work at the embassy here in Canberra? Can you just tell us a little bit about the embassy, the work you're doing, and your work with German communities across Australia?
Canberra obviously is the political capital, but Australia is a very vast country with a lot of very prominent and big cities around. So we cannot, as the embassy, just concentrate here on the political capital, but we have to reach out to the regions. We have 7 honorary consuls in Australia, and by the way, also 4 honorary consuls in Pacific Island states, like Solomon Islands, PNG, Nauru, and Vanuatu. So these are the persons that are on the ground, that are in the community, and that, as you wish, are also antenna for the embassy. We reach out to the Australian public. We buy, for instance, German weeks, like in Brisbane, in Adelaide, where we show the whole range of our cooperation, scientific cooperation with the universities, the cultural cooperation that is brought forward by our 2 cultural institutes, the Goethe Institute in Sydney and Melbourne, but also the schools that we have here. It's nearly 20 schools that are more or less also specialized in German language teaching. And we are proud of 90,000 German speakers here in Australia. We wish, of course, that it would be more, that it would increase, which is a challenge. But so there are links where we can reach out. And
sorry. Yeah. How do you measure that? How do you get to the 90,000? I mean, is this German-born Australians or people that identify German heritage, or do you have some other way of measuring how many German speakers there are?
Basically, you know how many, you know about the schools you have,
right?
You know about the pupils you have, you know from the German, from the Goethe Institute, how many courses of Germans are being followed. We have, I think we reached out to our network, put those numbers together. Of course, they are not. It's not your professor. It's not exact science, but it's
close.
Estimates.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And just this remarkable realm of activity, I think, at the moment going on in terms of from the embassy, but also so many other German entities here in Australia. I'm thinking of things like the Australia-German Research Network. Of course, academics think of the Humboldt program. There seems, do you see this again? Does it, going back to where we began our conversation, is this sort of part now of this new strategic alliance, or all of this is? I mean, it's obviously taken many years to reach this point, but it does seem that it's very rich and it's very mature, I think, in terms of these interactions, both institutionally, but also for individuals and communities.
You're absolutely right. We have roughly 600 corporations between universities of Germany and Australia. And I also know of prominent doctors, for instance, from Germany, that find the research possibilities they get here in Australia very fascinating, and that brings them to come for some years to Australia.
Finally, I'd like to raise with you the question of the future, or possible futures, in terms of when you look at the current relationship between Germany and Australia. If I were to ask you to look through your ambassadorial crystal ball out to, say, the next 20 or 30 years, what would you like to see? What do you think's, well, let's start with what do you think's probable, but what also do you think might be possible for the future of these relations between Germany and Australia?
When I look into the future, that is, of course, a challenge, as we all know. But I would imagine that Germany and Australia being close partners, sharing the same values, Australia being a natural partner for us in this region, that we engage more concretely together, that we not only intensify our interactions at higher level, at higher political level, but also cooperate really concretely in things that will determine our future. What is the future energy supply that we are going to have? Australia is a producer of road materials, dig and ship, but maybe we can see how we can work together on supply chains, enlarge that cooperation more in the technological field. That I think is something that would be worthwhile to do. And for the rest, I mean, what I would hope is that these people-to-people exchanges, that this network is a bit stronger, that ever stronger, that we are able to have more Australians coming to Germany to study in our universities, to get to know the country, to have let's say also emotional band with the country, that the Work in Australia program that is there, that has also was interrupted by COVID, is reinvigorated, and that so we get a lot of, I would say, ambassadors, as you wish, from both countries that bring forward this idea of international cooperation, of the value of international cooperation, of being able to talk to others and go that extra mile. of learning a language, of finding out that the other one is maybe from different background, but that there are a lot of commonalities. So I think this will help us to manage the hard times ahead.
Ambassador Grzeski, thanks for your time and thanks for joining us on Europe Now.
Thanks for interacting with me, and thanks for the exchange. Thank you, Professor.